Welcome everybody, this is Susan Finch, your host for All Volunteer, All Heart for Binky Patrol. And today I'm talking with Kimberly Haley Coleman, who turned her own frustration into a beautiful solution for thousands of people. When she found herself stuck abroad on business weekends wanting to volunteer but couldn't find any meaningful short-term opportunities, she started creating her own and discovered so many others wanted to join her. So have you ever thought about that? On a vacation, go somewhere and instead of just doing the touristy things, immerse yourself in the real culture, the real people, the real needs, and be part of the place you are visiting. So that was over 20 years ago. And now as founder and executive director of Global Aware, she's built something incredible, connecting volunteers with communities across 21 countries through carefully planned week-long service projects. So Kimberly, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here. And I've told the story, why you came to Global Aware 20 years ago, and you've built something totally special. And you were giving us a little taste just a minute ago of what this is really about and what it brings to the people that get involved. And I want to push back on something after we get through some of these pleasantries. So welcome. I'm glad that you're here.
Thank you, Susan. I really appreciate you having me.
I love what you were saying about, yes, we can write checks and checks do help. But going there and connecting, this is the piece where I struggle. And I hear it from people too. It's like, well, by the time I spend money to go somewhere and to go get involved in all this, why wouldn't I just give them the check and they could use it for a lot more things? And, that's just for me. If I go, for me to know, I already know I'm helping. Why do I actually need to go there? How do people weigh that?
Right. Such a good question. And it's worth asking because if you're just looking at the financial picture of it, it does make sense just to send a check. And I do think people should still give money to their favorite causes. This is a different approach because when you're going and, one of the examples I was explaining earlier where we're going and installing concrete floors in the homes of single moms in Guatemala. And you could just send a check to do that and not spend all the money on airfare. This is fundamentally impacting our volunteers as much or more than the local communities. So there's a selfish component to this because when our volunteers, who are a lot of multi-generational families, often traveling together, they go and meet the family that we're building the home for, and we're playing with the kids that are going to be living there. We're getting to know the mother, and we could have, as you said, just sent that check. But there's something magical that happens when we connect with that family and get to see what their lifestyle is like. And we're getting to experience the real beauties and the real challenges of a culture. And I know I mentioned this earlier, but my kids grew up with running water and electricity. And I could have just read to them about what it's like for somebody who doesn't have that. But somehow getting to spend a week seeing that, knowing it, and really understanding it, really from the inside out. But also seeing the real beauties of it, how much time these kids spend outside and how little screen time they have and how much connected time they have with their family and friends. It's this mind expansion that happens both for our volunteers and for the local communities. And, there's no check you can write that can do that to a kid's brain. That then when they come back, they care more about the world. They understand a little bit more about the challenges. If they're saying, hey, USAID was cut for HIV clinics for kids here, that might just sound like a statistic. But if you've met those kids on our program in South Africa, it may hit you a little bit differently, So that's part of it for me. That's a big piece of it.
I love that because when people come back from trips, they tell stories. They tell stories to the people in their circle, their communities. It changes how they think because they incorporate what they learned. I can always tell when I meet people and spend some time talking with them who has traveled outside the county they grew up in, to the state, to the country, and worldwide, who has spent time living outside the country, outside their region, because they have different perspectives that they bring in and share. And they make it very relatable when they talk about it because they lived it. And it does change the people. I've watched it with my kids. The conversations that he and his, they have with their friends vary so much depending on the experiences and the breadth of the experiences people have had. And summer, my daughter, she meets with people that have never left their county, and they're just in awe. And she's not a world traveler. I mean, but she's traveled to several states in the country, and she's stayed with other people, and she's volunteered with with Binky Patrol since she was in my tummy, and so she has a different perspective on a lot of things that her friends are just like, "What? That's really a thing?" And I think that's where the value goes beyond the check.
Yes. And even culturally, as you said, if you're exposed to a different way of thinking and not just assuming, if you really know one main culture and you go to another culture, the first reaction might be one of judgment, that why don't they do this way? Why are, the way I did it was better. But then when you're there, you can often see that that isn't true. So many things can quickly point out to you why a certain thing is done. And when you live it, it gets deep in your head and changes your thinking, even when it comes to coming up with these cross cultural solutions. That was the whole point of Kennedy creating the Peace Corps in the 60s, is he really wanted to create a constituency from which candidates would be chosen who had lived abroad and understood from the inside out what a country, a culture, a community was grappling with, so that when they sat down at the table, they were coming at it from a really meaningful way and understanding that culture. And that was his whole point. I'll give you an example. In Cambodia, we assemble wheelchairs and distribute them to landmine victims. And what's interesting about this is, of course, the landmines were put there in the late 60s, early 70s by the US and Vietnam. And while they've been cleared from the touristed areas and the main big cities, there's still many in the rural areas. And they're about this big, and they're neon pink and green and yellow. And, if you walk over them, they can go off, but often they've come unearthed. And as you might imagine, it's children that pick them up because
Mm,
they look like a
they're
ball.
pretty, yeah.
And they're really designed to maim more than kill. So it's really horrific how they get impacted from the bottom up. And I thought that giving wheelchairs to these children would be this really impactful moment that I would never forget. And it was, but not for the reason I thought. I had envisioned looking at these kids that it would hit, and it was looking at the parents. It was looking at the mother's eyeballs, from my own mother's eyeballs, the view they had for their children and their children's future, that we connected in this way, that if I had just written a check, it just wouldn't have done this. Now, I still write checks now, and just for the wheelchairs, but it changed my feeling about it. So it's these experiences that we feel that that's where the real beauty is, where there's this fundamental change, not just for the local communities on the ground, but in the minds of the people who are willing to serve. And again, it is a privilege. I think almost all volunteers, I would guess almost all, would come back saying they felt like got more out of it than the locals, because we are not going in as superheroes. We're not telling people what they need. We're working side by side with people. They're telling us what their challenges are, and they understand those challenges better than we do. And they usually, almost always, are much more capable, faster, and better at carrying out any of these solutions. The main thing they often lack are the funds to do it. So
Right.
if we are installing stovepipes and an adobe stove in a home where they're otherwise just building the fires on the open earth,
Yeah.
um, they don't have the money to buy the venting, but they know how to do it. So when we are merely standing as an equal, right, in these
Right.
communities, which means we are learning. And that's why we really end up, it's a bit lopsided, because I do feel like our volunteers end up coming home with all of this, right? I mean, I do think one of the things that separates us from many different organizations in terms of our focus is because of how we started out, when, why, and how. So many great organizations exist that serve college students and high school students that often have a lot longer time to give. So they
Right.
aren't super concerned about, okay, are we starting right at 8 a.m.? Are all of the materials ready? They're not having to worry about productivity. But because we've been focused on families and busy working North Americans, we're pretty tightly constructed and we get tangible things done. So we're not just there playing with kids and
Right.
doing language instruction, all of which also has value. It's
Right.
just a different focus in terms of how we accomplish it.
At the very beginning, when I was, reading your story too, and the thought of bridging a vacation to include a week of service, if you're already going over there, you're already on the plane for 14 hours or 12 hours or whatever it is, tag on a leg that is this.
Yeah,
Your
right.
expense has been done. It's going to be minimal to add it for the extra week.
Yeah,
And it'll probably end up being your favorite part of the vacation.
right.
I mean, how could it not be? I would start with the fluff if you guys are going to do this, and then do the special, the cherry on top of your trip, and that
Yes.
is changing lives by
Yeah.
showing up.
Yours and theirs. Right.
Yep. Oh, definitely. I find
Yeah,
that with Binky Patrol, the byproduct gifts, the unexpected gifts of watching it transform our volunteers,
that's right.
our volunteers' children and grandchildren, because neighbors, friends, it's like, never would have thought of this. Didn't know it
Well,
was so
and
easy.
you all appreciate more than anything that power of service for your own soul, what it does. That
Yes.
said, when people go on our program, so if they're going to our program in Machu Picchu, we know they don't want to go this far and not see Machu Picchu, right? So we're putting in 30 to 35 hours of service, but they're still going to go spend the day at Machu Picchu. They're still going to go and see Sacsayhuaman ruins. We just try and take a bit of a less traditional consumer tourist viewpoint. So we sprinkle in the culture activities throughout the week, but the service is the driving force. So we really hope that people are getting all of that in that 1 week. Although, I would guess 40% of our volunteers stay a few days extra or come a few days early just
Right.
so they feel like they can see, have even more time to do it all. And while it's largely irrelevant, it's a tax deductible way to give service because our volunteers are staying in pretty, mid-range, modest accommodations. They're not staying at the Ritz-Carlton,
Right.
and so they're carrying out the service of our organization, but they're getting to see all the cultural sites too. And particularly for kids, we're not going to, well, there Cusco's a good example. Of course, there are all of the beautiful Catholic churches on the main square, and you have free time to do these things. But we're not spending a lot of time in line and buses going to churches and museums because of how we've structured our week. There's a lot more interaction, human to human, with the communities we're there to serve. So it is different from a traditional tourist vacation. And we really terrible if anybody's caught off guard. So anybody going to do this needs to know that, if you're the kind of person who really needs a Ritz Carlton, this is not the right vacation. And if you're really wanting to like chain restaurants or what make you comfortable, this also is not the right vacation. And everyone has different expectations with their free time. And this is for when people are ready, right? Ready to make a difference, volunteer, really get to see who is benefiting from the hours they give and getting to know them, getting to know a piece of their life. What's beautiful about it, what's hard, what's challenging about their life. Because it's not the same challenges that we have.
Right.
I mean, too, it's some of the biggest things that we see over and over. Access obviously to healthcare
Mhm.
and education. It varies so much that to see that firsthand, how standards of living shift and what we think is necessarily good isn't always.
So it almost sounds to me like Global Wear is a travel agency.
Yes, we are, except, one thing that really is different. Well, once you get there, everything is handled in terms of meals and accommodations and our how time is spent, but we don't book airfare. That's really a for-profit business, buying and selling airfare, so we don't get involved.
I like it.
That said, when airfare is done in conjunction with our programs, if it's only done, that is a tax deductible expense, just like the program fee is. As long as it's not first class, we're supposed to make sure people talk to their own tax advisor for flights, since we don't have anything to do with flights.
Oh, I love this. I mean, you have me. I have a girlfriend, and she's wanted me to take, I don't travel much. And part of it is I'm just nervous about it. I'm
Sure.
very much a homebody. It's also inconvenient for my husband for me to travel because he's disabled. And she says, I really want to go on a big trip with you. And I can't imagine a better trip than something like this because she's traveled throughout the world and taken these beautiful, she's done the Rick Steves, tours and all those types of things. And she's done that. But this would be different. And she and I both do Binky Patrol together. And she's one of my like heart friends. And what a great way to spend that, to find your like heart friends, travel companions, that you could bring this and have those shared memories.
Yeah. Yes.
And then bring it back and make the group bigger next time. Why not?
Right. Right.
And pick a
Yeah.
new place. I mean, it looks like there are enough destinations and projects everybody can work on and choose from.
Yeah. And we tend to have they tend to be smaller groups. We tend to have 10 people at a time. It's funny. I
Mhm.
gave a speech with Rick Steves last year about the intersection of philanthropy and travel. And
Yes.
he is a very big cheerleader in this area. And he will tell you, because he's given this speech a few times, that, when he first started out, he was just trying to get people to think beyond Florida for their vacation. This is back, in the late
Yeah.
70s. And now, even though all of it, 100% of his programs are in Europe, he actually did Africa briefly, but now he's only in Europe. And yet, he goes around the country giving this speech about how important it is to get outside of Europe. He talks about why and how one of his big messages is he thinks that before you bomb someone, you should get to know them. And that if you get
Ooh.
to know people, you're less likely to want to bomb them. He has a really compelling way of looking at travel in that sense. And I like actually where what we really share in common is this belief that it's about human engagement. If you're in Germany, drink a stein of beer next to a local at a local place. Don't just go to the touristy spots and hang out in your hotels, but engage, as your friend might know. And one of the things with service travel that's a little bit quirky and different from a lot of traditional travel is the kind of traveler that comes with us. We have a lot of solo travelers. A grandmother may go with a grandchild, neighbors. So it's a little bit different because the travel pairings are less traditional because it's a less traditional kind of travel. It's not a honeymoon type of travel.
Right. Oh, I love this idea. I
Yeah.
mean, it's one of those things that would say, because it would help others, I could make myself brave.
Yeah.
I could
Well,
try
and
something
you're
new.
right to think because there are so many pieces, right? I mean, you go to a country and you have to worry, first of all, about security and safety, both from, hey, am I going to have to worry about getting Zika or yellow fever and what is the safety situation when I'm there? Am I more likely to be mugged? Cusco's at a very high altitude. I mean, these are all things that, somebody going into it thinking, okay, I don't know how to build a house. I don't speak Vietnamese. How am I going to? Our coordinator, who stays with our volunteer the whole time, is, of course, bilingual. And we walk everyone through, hey, if you're going to need a visa, this is what you're going to need and how to get it. This is what the safety. The other thing I will say is where we serve varies because the situation will vary. If there is an outbreak of some kind that's dangerous, we stop serving there. We have to worry about, of course, our liability insurance and medical insurance. So we are guided by all of the same State Department, the British equivalent and the Canadian equivalent, all three of those governments' safety advisory and alerts. So we really can only operate in places that are safe.
Right.
And anyone can get hit by a car anywhere in the world.
Right.
Somebody could step on a nail anywhere in the world. You can't eliminate all risk, but and we don't do things like putting people high up on ladders or operating heavy equipment and machinery. We have to be able to accept volunteers that have absolutely no skills in terms of
Right.
language or job skills because it's about that togetherness. We're sitting there learning by the foremen and the coordinators that we have on the ground. So we're not expecting anyone to know what they're doing. The idea is, again, it's learning. It's a
Yes.
learning exercise. And we're leaving something tangible behind. But look, the locals are always better at what we do. Of course they are.
Yeah, it's their country.
It's their
Sure.
country. They know what they're doing. They know how to work with the materials. that we're working with and in the environment. One of the biggest things we face in Cusco, because it's at such a high altitude, everybody gets there and you still see mountains above you. So you feel like, gosh, maybe you're not that high, but you really are. And it's beautiful, and people want to get there and celebrate and go stomping around and having a drink of local alcohol. And it's just a bad idea for a few days until you can get used to the
Right.
climate. And our coordinator, of course, in our materials, in our podcasts, our YouTube channel, all that, we're always trying to educate people so they know when you get there. Our coordinator's like, I know you want to go run off like a billy goat on these mountains. Wait a few days. You have time. You have time. So that you have somebody shepherding you through. This is the risk. This is, if you're going to get money, go to that ATM, not that one,
Right.
because otherwise, of course, there's going to be fear and uncertainty. It's going to be a new place for almost anybody going there. So, and I think people are right to have those reservations going into it.
What's another thing that might surprise people about international volunteering? Maybe something you've learned that goes against common assumptions.
It's a good question. I think the willingness for most local communities, there are a couple, like in Costa Rica, people are culturally conditioned to be a bit more shy. But in many other countries, in South Africa being an example, you really don't have to try to engage with people. They will engage with you. Those kids, so we built a five-a-side soccer pitch, which is very popular in the townships for good reason. There's not a lot of space.
Right.
And all you have to do is get a ball out, and before you know it, there's 30 or 40 of your best new friends under the age of 10 all crowding around playing the game with you and willing to talk. And again, I mean, it's magical because I don't think people expect that these kinds of organic interactions will happen, because it doesn't happen as readily here in North
Right.
America. It can, but to the degree it happens there, because again, in most of the countries where we're working, people have less resources. And so they have less cell phones. People aren't looking down as they walk around. They're looking up, and they see anybody new, anybody visiting, anybody serving. They don't feel a wall between the volunteer and the local communities. So the interactions happen quite readily. If somebody starts, I mean, in South Africa, this is an example. If you ask someone, hey, can you tell me what the national anthem sounds like? And a little 5-year-old will start singing. All of a sudden, you'll hear 20 other people singing it. It's just this.
Yeah.
Writing a check isn't going to do that. And you don't have that in your mind before you go, right?
No.
You're not sitting there looking forward to that because you don't know what's going to happen. So a lot of the surprises are the things that happen around that. We always tell people, you don't need to bring anything in terms of donations or goods, because what you're giving is obviously so generous. If you decide you wanted to, the schools often need rulers and pencils or whatever. So people will, if they're interested in bringing donations, they'll usually bring a suitcase of those things to hand out. And then they'll see that so many of the kids don't have any shoes, or they're wearing the same pair of shorts every day. And they're looking at their own clothes that have gotten muddy on the service site, and they realize even these things, if they think, hey, they're beyond use, there are people all around them that will use those things. Again, it makes you have this recognition of how much our standard of living varies. And, on occasion, we'll get criticism through our website or social media saying things like, why are we helping people in other countries when we still have challenges here? And fair
Fair
question.
question.
Yes, we still have challenges here. But two things. One, I mean, you can be below the poverty level in the United States and still have access to running water and electricity. And you can be upper middle class in South Africa and Cape Town and have none of that. So what we think of as standard of living and poverty is not the same. The definitions are different. Now, our volunteers, even though they're staying in what I would consider mid-range accommodations, we still have flushing toilets, power, electricity, your own bathroom, locks. It's just a mid-range Western style. Some of them are actually quite atmospheric, so they vary. But you feel like they're very luxurious when you see how the local community members are often having to live with so few resources. And our coordinators are really great at shepherding people through the process. And we have currently something we've been doing is in the mornings, we go through a cultural activity. We try and talk about one topic that a tourist would never know. So, for example, in Costa Rica, Monday it might be, did you know in Costa Rica, we don't have street addresses? If somebody was trying to mail something to you, it would be, go to the third house on the left, 300 meters south of the soccer field that's 200 kilometers south of Cartago. It's a paragraph. And it's just so shocking for people to hear this. Like, how can that be? How can that exist? And it brings other discussions up. Again, Japan, they don't have street addresses and they're very modern, right? So how can that be? And then in the evening, we'll have reflection exercises. Like, can you name something you were grateful for today, or an act of kindness, so that we try to provide the structure where you're seeing things a little bit
Mhm.
differently, you're serving, you're interacting, but hopefully you're reflecting too, and your brain's getting a chance to kind of relax out of the normal confines of our culture, to have that bigger, broader global view and understanding, compassion and empathy, right? That's the goal.
That is the goal. And that most of the time, what you were saying, the Rick Steves thing, meet the people before you bomb them. And I
Yeah,
know that's extreme to say that,
yeah,
but that is the missing piece most of the time is we have not humanized the humans.
right.
And how can you not? We have to see ourselves in others. We have to see the people we love and care about in others to realize they're just like us.
They're just like us, the exact same interests, you know.
And they're scared and they get angry and they don't like other people and they're fearful and all these things. But the more we can open up those conversations and to
That's right.
truly listen and to, be determined, I am going to learn about this before I make judgments. That's a hard thing for people to do. I see it all the time.
Mhm.
We hear it because it's easier to just go at this level rather than bringing it down to this.
That's right.
I'm stunned by ignorance daily. I'm stunned by cold heartedness daily.
Yes.
And it's the one thing that I know all we can do is first handle right here, right here, my family, my house family.
Yes.
And making those examples, those opportunities, having those conversations, rather than just everybody agreeing with whatever's being thrown at us to accept, yeah, they're bad people. Yeah, they're awful. Yes, they're less than us.
Right.
Question that because they're looking at you the same way
Right.
because you sound like an ignorant boob. So why wouldn't you want people to look at you as maybe having a brain in your head, a heart, compassion? You got to start right here because come on, let's talk about the worldview of the US and a lot of our citizens right now. It's not good.
No.
we
And
are
you know,
we are
okay, that
selfish
brings up
boobs.
totally on that point in terms of how we're viewed and how we view people, and any of the violence and compassion that is happening and missing. You know, there was a study done by the Brookings Institute back in, I want to say 2009, 2010. So this data will be out of date, but what they did is they were trying to monetize, look at, if you invest in a Peace Corps volunteer, if you put this much money in, how much value do we get out? And they were trying to compare hard power versus soft power. And so at the time, and the numbers won't be exact, but they're more or less from about 2010. At the time, the fully loaded cost for a soldier was about $400,000 a year. That's their medical insurance, their training, the tank they're driving, the machine guns, all that stuff. And we were spending $16,000 a year on a Peace Corps volunteer, right? And so if you put a Peace Corps volunteer in, say, a village in Afghanistan that's stationed there for 2.5 years teaching, and you put a soldier in a corner in Afghanistan for 2.5 years, what is the outcome of what that was worth? And the upshot is they had a really hard time putting a dollar value on it. But what they did say is, when a Peace Corps volunteer is in a community and all the kids and the local neighbors, and everybody sees it and knows it and sees this North American giving their time and trying to educate people and interacting with everyone, all these people all of a sudden have warm, fuzzy feelings toward the country they came from. And when they see somebody walking down the street with a machine gun on them, and all of the gear over them, it has the opposite effect. And how long does that last when you've done? And I'm not saying we don't need an army and that we don't need to have a defense system. What the upshot of that study was is that we've been underutilizing our soft power, that the value of that soft power, of that human to human interaction, both for the local community and for ourselves, is so huge and so vast, it's hard to measure.
Yes.
That our communities, what we get out of it. And so, we have a lot of corporations that will travel with us so even though our normal programs are about 10 people, we'll have up to 250 people with companies that will come and take on larger projects. And so while they are bonding opportunities and a chance to get outside of what they know, they're also getting to see and experience the power of, hey, we all just put this up. We all just built this for relatively little money, considering what it costs to put up a school or a library here, really, and how many people are served by it. And it's this feeling of empowerment that I think a lot of our kids today, they feel politically like unengaged and uninterested. I think maybe they feel powerless, like
Yes.
they're whatever they're doing isn't making an impact. And what changes that? What fundamentally gives them the sense that they can make a difference? They do matter. And it's little opportunities like this, whether it's through a church or a school or an organization like ours, that there are these opportunities for people to realize they make a difference and not just look at, is their post getting enough likes? Do they matter based on that?
Oh,
But it is true because yeah, locally, of course, every community you go to, they're going to have a different view. And obviously, the communities where we work, we're so well received because we've been there long enough, interacting and serving alongside them. We've had groups in the Philippines where our volunteers were treated like celebrities to the point it was a little embarrassing.
yeah.
Over time, that tends to lessen. Anyway, so that leads to experiences that are hard to anticipate as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that. We're about out of time.
Yeah.
And so, one last question. If you could wave a magic wand to change one thing about how people approach volunteering, what would it be?
Oh, not to hesitate, not to think there'll be time sometime in the future. All of our programs closed for 6 months in 2020, and things do change. We had been working on a Russia program, which I don't know that it'll ever reopen. We used to have a program in China. I'm doubtful that that will ever reopen. So many things have changed, and who would think that things could change quickly, but we've seen it.
Yeah.
And so we have a lot of different locations, but we can't guarantee what's going to be open 2 years from now and how that's going to work. I think a lot of people do hesitate. They think one day, and I would just say resist that. Seize it now. Seize not just your volunteering and your service abroad. Obviously, locally, there's so many opportunities to serve and give back, and we all benefit from it.
I heard a homily at church, and I loved it because it was, we're never going to be in our old age saying, gosh, I wish I had scrolled more.
Mm. Yeah.
I wish I had binged more. I wish I,
Right. That's
you're
right.
going to reflect on these pieces, the impact. You're going to sit back and smile that that was cool. I remember that. I remember those faces. I remember those people.
Yeah.
These are the things, and these are the things we need to share with our generations going down. Let them know they can make a difference. They have control. My son
Mhm.
despairs, says, I'm never going to be able to own a house. I'm never going to be able to do anything. So, but you can still change lives. So why don't we focus on that first? What can you do? All of us can volunteer. We always say in Binky Patrol, volunteering 1 hour a month can change lives.
Yes.
Start there. Get a taste for it. See the impact. See the people you'll start to surround yourself with and how that changes your life as well. That's how we change the world. And then get braver. So, if you want to learn more about GlobeAware or explore joining one of their volunteer programs, head to globeaware.org. You can also find them everywhere on social media at GlobeAware. Is there anything else you want to leave them with?
No, I'm just so grateful. Thank you. Thank you for all your time. I really do appreciate it, Susan.
Well, it's lovely what you're doing, and I do want to talk about you more and give people and just new ways of thinking, of volunteering, of vacationing, of spending their money, of spending their time, of changing hearts,
Yeah.
starting right in their own. So thank you. Thanks for joining me and being spontaneous this morning.
All right. Well, thank you again. I really do appreciate it.